Why did the general drop his tray like he'd seen a ghost? It happened in a heartbeat. One moment, the Fort Bragg mess hall was alive with chatter, boots scraping against linoleum, and the hum of military routine. The next, silence rippled through the air like shockwaves after an explosion. Every soldier's eyes turned toward the serving line, toward the young woman frozen behind it. Elena Ramirez, 24 years old, specialist U.S. Army. Her uniform pressed, her sleeves rolled high from the heat of the kitchen. She stood still, her gloved hands gripping the ladle midair, gravy dripping in slow motion. Across from her, General Harlan Thorp, the legend, the iron-faced commander whose voice could silence a battalion, stared at her like the ground had just opened beneath his boots. The tray clattered to the floor, a crash that seemed louder than gunfire. Forks froze midair. Conversations died mid-sentence. For a few seconds, the world held its breath. What could shake a man like General Thorp? The answer lay inked on the skin of Elena's forearm, a small, delicate phoenix rising from ashes. The design was simple, faded red and black, but something in it hit him harder than a battlefield memory. His pupils constricted, his jaw locked. He whispered something only he could hear. Then, in one jerky motion, he straightened his back, trying to reclaim the steel of command that had cracked for a fleeting instant. "Carry on," he barked, voice rough, forced. The spell broke. Soldiers turned back to their meals. The noise resumed, but lighter, cautious, like the air itself was aware something had shifted. Elena blinked, confused. What just happened? The man looked like he'd seen death. Her heart thumped faster, not out of fear, but unease. She'd seen a lot on base, tempers, drills, people breaking under pressure, but never a general losing his composure like that. He walked away without another glance, boots echoing down the hallway, leaving a trail of questions she couldn't shake. That night, long after lights out, the sound of that tray hitting the floor still echoed in her head. Elena had joined the army to escape ghosts, not summon new ones. Her story began far from the polish of Fort Bragg, a dusty border town in Texas, where dreams were smaller than the cracked pavement, and the stars were the only thing that ever seemed endless. Her mother, Maria Ramirez, worked 2 jobs cleaning houses by day, waitressing by night, while Elena grew up in the flicker of a single yellow bulb inside a weather-beaten trailer. She never knew her father. "He was a soldier," her mother used to say, always with the same tone, part bitterness, part longing. "He chose the uniform over us." Those words cut deep, even when Elena was too young to understand why. She would sit by the window some nights, watching headlights pass on the highway, wondering if one of those cars carried a man who might stop and say her name. None ever did. By 10, she was old enough to cook for herself, to lock the door at night, to see through her mother's brave smiles. By 15, she'd learned that dreams without money are just ways to stay awake longer. Then came the sickness, cancer. Maria fought hard, the way she fought everything, quietly, stubbornly. But the disease didn't care about willpower or dignity. Medical bills piled up like enemy ranks, and the house grew emptier, lonelier, quieter. Elena dropped out of school, worked nights, flipped burgers, sold her mother's old jewelry to keep the lights on. She sat through the sound of oxygen machines and whispered promises she couldn't keep. When the end came, a rainy night, cold and merciless, she was 17, standing in the glow of a flickering hospital sign, holding a bag of clothes and a heart full of fire. Maria had left her with one sentence, one final whisper. "You're stronger than you know, Mija. Rise from it, always rise." The next morning, a recruiter came knocking. The army offered her everything she didn't have: a bed, a paycheck, and a purpose. "You'll be part of something bigger," the recruiter said with a polished grin. Bigger sounded good. Bigger meant escape. Basic training hit her like a storm. The first weeks were pure chaos, yelling, running, falling, failing. But she didn't break. Every time the drill sergeant screamed in her face, she saw her mother's tired eyes. Every time someone said she wasn't strong enough, She remembered the nights she carried her mother from bed to the bathroom. Pain was familiar. Discipline was just a cleaner version of survival. By the end of boot camp, she wasn't just surviving anymore, she was excelling. Quiet, focused, reliable, the kind of soldier who didn't need to shout to be respected. But the tattoo, that came later. On a weekend pass, she found herself sitting in a tiny shop off base, the hum of the needle buzzing through her bones. The phoenix had always been her mother's symbol for her, a reminder that fire doesn't destroy everything. Sometimes it forges something new. It wasn't rebellion, it was remembrance. She didn't know that somewhere, halfway across the world, another phoenix existed, inked on the arm of the man who'd walked away from her life before she could walk at all. When General Thorp dropped that tray, he didn't just see ink. He saw his sins staring back at him. In his office later that night, the old soldier sat in the dark, metals glinting faintly in the lamplight. His reflection in the window looked like a stranger. He'd spent decades fighting wars, but none as brutal as the one inside his chest right now. He opened a drawer and pulled out a faded photograph, a young woman with laughing eyes and hair that caught sunlight like a halo. Maria Ramirez, his Maria. They met in El Paso before his first deployment. She was 20, full of life and questions. He was 26, already hardened by the uniform. They'd gotten matching tattoos one wild night, two phoenixes, twin flames. He promised her he'd come back. He didn't. The military became his religion, his addiction, his excuse. Letters from her came and went. Then one arrived, the last one mentioning a baby on the way. He didn't respond. He buried himself in missions and silence. Now, all these years later, he'd seen her face again, not Maria, but something achingly close. Same eyes, same expression, same mark. Could it be? He turned to his computer, his hands trembling. Personnel records. Ramirez Elena, 24, enlisted 3 years ago. Mother, Maria Ramirez. Father, unknown. His breath hitched. The dates fit. The details matched. Every line on the screen tightened the noose of regret around his heart. He closed the file and sat back, his head heavy with decades of what-ifs. "What have I done?" he whispered to the dark. Meanwhile, Elena tried to shake the day off. Back in the barracks, the girls were laughing about the incident, about the general's face when the tray hit the floor. Sarah, her roommate, was reenacting it, holding an invisible tray, pretending to faint. Elena laughed too, but it didn't reach her eyes. Something about the way he looked at her, like he knew her, wouldn't leave her. "Maybe he's got PTSD or something," Sarah said, stretching out on her bunk. "Or maybe your cooking scared him." "Ha," Elena replied, rolling her eyes. But deep down, unease twisted in her gut. That night when the laughter faded and snores replaced chatter, she lay awake staring at the ceiling. Her mind drifted back to the photo she kept in her locker, her mother holding her as a baby, smiling despite exhaustion. In the corner of that photo, a man's arm rested on her shoulder, only the arm. The rest cropped out. On that arm, faintly visible, was the edge of a tattoo, a phoenix. She'd never noticed it until now. Her pulse quickened. She sat up, pulling the picture from her drawer under the faint glow of her phone screen. The tattoo, it matched hers, the lines, the curve of the wings. A chill crawled up her spine. "Who were you, Mom?" she whispered. "And who was he?" Across the base, the general couldn't sleep either. He ordered a private call to an old contact, someone who owed him favors. "I need a DNA test," he said quietly into the phone, discreetly. "On who?" "A specialist, Ramirez." The silence on the other end said everything. "You think she's—" "I don't know," he cut in, "but I need to." He hung up, his throat dry. For the first time in years, the unshakable General Harlan Thorp felt fear, not of bullets or death, but of truth. The following days carried an undercurrent of tension. Elena felt it before she saw it, the way officers' eyes lingered on her a little longer in the mess hall, the subtle nod from Thorp when their paths crossed. He didn't call her out again, didn't say a word, but something had changed. The silence between them was louder than any conversation. She tried to push it aside, bury herself in routine. Work, train, sleep, repeat. But curiosity gnawed at her like rust on metal. Who was he, really? And why did he look at her like that tattoo wasn't just a design, but a confession? One afternoon, while cleaning up after lunch, she caught sight of him standing in the doorway again, watching, not with authority but with something softer, hesitation. She turned, ladle in hand. "Sir, is everything all right?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. For a heartbeat, the great General Thorp looked utterly lost. "It's fine," he said finally, voice rough. "Carry on." But as he turned to leave, he muttered under his breath words she barely caught. Maria's eyes. The ladle slipped from her hand, splashing gravy on the floor. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice trembling. He didn't answer, he just walked away. And in that moment, something shifted inside her. Not fear, not confusion, something deeper. Recognition. That night, Elena pulled out a shoebox from under her bed, her mother's letters, photos, little keepsakes she'd kept hidden for years. Most were faded, brittle, marked by time. But one envelope stood out. It was addressed to a name she'd never seen before. Harlan Thorp. Unopened. Her hands shook as she slid her finger under the flap. Inside, the letter was dated 24 years ago. The handwriting shaky, rushed. "If you're reading this, Harlan, it means I never got the chance to tell you. She's yours. Her name is Elena. She's got your eyes, your fire. Don't let her grow up without knowing who she came from." Elena's heart stopped. The paper slipped from her hands. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, the kind that carries the weight of something inevitable. She looked at her reflection in the small mirror on the wall, her face pale, her tattoo gleaming faintly under the light. A phoenix rising from ashes. She whispered into the quiet, as if her mother could hear her. "Mom, you kept this from me. Why?" And somewhere across the base, alone in his office, Harlan Thorp stared at the same storm rolling in, whispering a question that mirrored hers. "What do I say to the daughter I never knew I had? What do you say to the daughter you abandoned before she could even speak your name?" That question haunted General Harlan Thorp long after the storm outside had passed. The rain had stopped, but the air in his office still felt heavy, charged like the calm after artillery fire. Papers lay scattered across his desk, maps and mission reports pushed aside. None of them mattered now, not compared to the letter he'd found, the name that refused to leave his mind. Elena Ramirez. His daughter. He'd seen the resemblance now in everything. The way she stood at attention, the firm set of her jaw when she spoke, the quiet fire in her eyes. It wasn't just coincidence. It was blood. It was Maria's spirit living in another form. He sat there in the dim light, staring at the photo he'd kept for years, Maria laughing on the hood of his old Jeep, sun spilling across her hair. He used to look at that photo before every deployment, a reminder of what he'd lost by choice. He told himself duty came first. Honor, service, country. But now, staring at her daughter's face in his mind, those words sounded hollow. For the first time in decades, the general who had commanded men into battle felt like a coward. Across base, Elena couldn't sleep either. Her heart raced as she read and reread her mother's old letter. The handwriting, once so familiar, now felt like a message from the grave, one that rewrote everything she thought she knew. "She's yours, her name is Elena." She whispered the words over and over, disbelief colliding with anger, sorrow mixing with something deeper, betrayal. Why hadn't her mother told her? Why had she gone her whole life thinking her father was a ghost when he'd been alive, commanding troops, wearing medals and giving orders like he owned the world? Elena slammed the box shut and pressed her palms against her eyes. "You don't get to come back now," she muttered into the darkness. Not after 24 years. But her chest ached with something she couldn't name, because as much as she hated the idea of him, she also wanted to understand. She wanted answers. The next morning, sunlight filtered weakly through the barracks window. Soldiers moved through their routines, showers, coffee, drills. Life on base didn't pause for personal tragedies. The army didn't care who your father was or wasn't. Elena moved through her shift like a machine, the smell of eggs and burnt toast filling the air. Her hands worked, but her mind was elsewhere, in that letter, in the photo, in the moment when Thorp said her mother's name. Every few minutes, her eyes flicked toward the door. He didn't show. But around midday, an orderly approached her with a folded slip of paper. "General Thorp wants to see you," the young private said nervously. "Now." Her stomach dropped. She followed the long hallway to the administrative wing, the air thick with the sterile scent of coffee and paper. Outside his office, she hesitated. The last time she'd seen him, a tray had shattered between them. What would break this time? "Come in," his voice called from inside. She stepped through the door. He was standing by the window, back straight, hands behind his back, staring out at the parade field. The sunlight cut across his uniform, glinting off his medals, but the man beneath them looked older, smaller somehow. "Specialist Ramirez," he said softly. "Sir." The word came out sharp, clipped armor in a single syllable. He turned then, eyes meeting hers. For a long moment neither spoke. The silence was suffocating. Finally he nodded toward the chair. "Sit, please." She remained standing. "I prefer to stand, sir." A faint, sad smile touched his lips. "Just like your mother," he murmured. Her throat tightened. "You knew her." "I did." He took a slow breath. "More than you probably know." The air felt electric. He reached into his desk drawer, pulling out an old, creased photograph, the same one she'd seen pieces of in her mother's things. He laid it gently on the desk between them. In the picture, Maria sat laughing beside him, her hand resting on his arm. On both their forearms, the same tattoo. Two phoenixes, wings almost touching. Elena stared, the photo blurred through her tears. "I left because I thought it was the right thing," Thorp said quietly. "I told myself the military life wasn't for families, that I was protecting her from the chaos that comes with this uniform, but I was just running, from fear, from love, from everything I couldn't control." He looked up, his eyes raw, unguarded. "I didn't know about you until it was too late. By the time I realized what I'd done, she was gone." Elena's voice cracked. "You could have come, you could have written, you could have been there when she died." "I know," his voice trembled, "and I'll carry that until my last day." The room went quiet except for the hum of the old ceiling fan. For a moment she wanted to scream at him, to throw the photo back, to tell him he didn't get to stand there and pretend regret was redemption. But another part of her, the part that had spent years longing for answers, couldn't move. She saw the pain in his face, real and deep. She recognized it because she'd lived it too. "Why now?" she asked finally. "Why tell me now?" He hesitated. "Because I couldn't live with another lie, and because," he stopped, swallowing hard, "because you deserve to know who you are, not just a soldier, not just a survivor, my daughter." The word hit her like a physical blow. She turned away, blinking fast, her hands trembling. "I don't know what to do with that," she said finally, voice low. "I don't even know who you are." "I don't expect forgiveness," Thorp said. "Just a chance to know you, to make things right if I still can." She stared at the window, at the reflection of two people who should have been family long ago. The silence stretched between them, fragile, unfinished. Then she nodded once, barely perceptible. "We'll see." She turned and walked out. He didn't stop her. But when the door closed, his hands gripped the edge of the desk until his knuckles went white. Because he knew the hardest battles aren't fought on foreign soil. They're fought here in the heart. Days passed. Elena avoided him, burying herself in duty. But everywhere she went, whispers followed. Rumors spread like wildfire in closed circles that the general had taken a special interest in a junior soldier, that she'd gotten close to him somehow. The army loved gossip, and base life had nothing more intoxicating than scandal. She ignored it at first, but the stares, the muttered comments, the sudden distance from her squad, they cut deeper than she let on. One night in the barracks, Sarah finally confronted her. "Elena," she said carefully, "people are saying things about you and Thorp." Elena slammed her locker shut. "Let them talk." "Is it true? Do you know him?" Elena hesitated. The truth burned her tongue. "It's complicated." Sarah frowned. "Complicated how?" Elena met her eyes. "He's my father." Sarah blinked, stunned. "You're kidding." "I wish I was." The room went quiet. After that, word spread faster than bullets. By morning, the whole base knew. Some soldiers avoided her. Others whispered pity. A few looked at her like she'd cheated her way into privilege she never asked for. But Thorp didn't hide. He invited her to lunch off base one afternoon, a small diner in town, far from uniforms and ranks. She agreed reluctantly. The place was quiet, sunlight spilling across cracked leather booths. Thorp ordered coffee. She didn't touch her food. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, he said, "You look just like her when you're angry." Elena gave a humorless laugh. "Then I must look like her a lot." He smiled faintly. "She'd be proud of you, you know." She looked up, eyes sharp. "You don't get to say that." He nodded slowly. "Fair enough." Silence again. Then softly he said, "You've got questions, ask them." She leaned forward, voice trembling. "Did you ever love her, or was she just another story between deployments?" His answer came without hesitation. "I loved her, more than the job, more than myself. That's why I left." "That doesn't make sense." "It does when you're young and scared," he said. "I thought I could protect her by staying away. I thought she'd move on. But all I did was abandon two people who needed me most." His eyes glistened. The man who'd survived ambushes and firefights now sat before her, unarmed in every way that mattered. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Elena," he said quietly. "Just a chance to be honest, even if it's 20 years too late." Her chest tightened. Part of her wanted to believe him. Part of her wanted to never see him again. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "My mom used to say I got my fire from someone who didn't stick around long enough to see it burn." Thorp flinched. "She was right, but I see it now." Elena looked away, blinking fast. "It's too late for words, General." He nodded. "Then let my actions speak." That evening, as the sun dipped low, Elena sat by the barracks window, watching the sky bleed orange over the field. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of both loss and possibility pressing against her ribs. Could people like them ever rebuild something real? Could blood rewrite years of silence? She didn't know. But she remembered her mother's final whisper, "Rise from it." Maybe this, facing him, hearing the truth, was part of that rising. Yet even as she thought it, shadows moved beneath the surface of their fragile reunion. Someone was watching. In a dim office across the base, Colonel Vance leaned back in his chair, smirking as he scrolled through an intercepted report. General Thorp's sudden connection to a young soldier, personal meetings, off-base lunches, DNA tests ordered through back channels. Vance's grin widened. He'd waited years for this, the chance to bring Thorp down. The man who left him behind in Kandahar, who took the glory and buried the guilt. Now fate was handing him a weapon. He lit a cigarette, smoke curling around his face like a promise. "Let's see how far your phoenix can rise," he muttered. And somewhere on the other side of base, Elena Ramirez felt a chill crawl down her spine, the kind that comes when the storm hasn't passed, only paused. What happens when the past you've buried starts fighting back? Elena didn't know that someone was already digging into hers. Days passed in uneasy calm. Fort Bragg pulsed with its usual rhythm: morning drills, orders barked across courtyards, engines rumbling as convoys rolled out. To anyone watching, Specialist Elena Ramirez was just another soldier going through motions. But inside, she felt split in two. Half of her wanted to forget that conversation with Thorp ever happened. The other half couldn't stop replaying every word. He was her father. The truth had weight, and it pressed on her every second. The base had its own kind of silence, not peace, but the quiet hum of secrets. Soldiers knew how to hide them well. You learn early on that not everything in uniform is black and white. There are shades of duty, of guilt, of survival. And right now, somewhere in those shades, someone was watching her. Colonel Vance watched through the blinds of his temporary office, eyes fixed on the figure crossing the courtyard. Elena Ramirez. Her name meant nothing to him a week ago. Now it was the key to his revenge. He'd waited years for a moment like this. Once upon a time, he and Harlan Thorp had been brothers in arms, two rising officers who led men through fire, until Kandahar, until the mission that went wrong, until Thorp left him bleeding in the dust, reports rewritten, blame shifted, medals pinned. And Vance, demoted, discredited, forgotten. He'd survived, rebuilt a career in the shadows, waiting, always waiting. Now here was Thorp's weakness walking around in plain sight. A young woman with the same eyes as Maria Ramirez, the same tattoo that haunted the general's past. "Phoenix," Vance muttered, his lip curling. "Let's see how brightly you burn." He picked up the phone. "Get me access to Thorp's restricted personnel files and the Kandahar op logs." "Sir, those are classified." "Do it," Vance snapped, "and keep your mouth shut." He hung up and leaned back, smoke curling from the cigarette between his fingers. Revenge wasn't always about bullets. Sometimes it was about patience, about letting truth rot a man from the inside. Elena noticed the tension first during training drills. It was in the way her commanding officer avoided eye contact, how her teammates, the same ones who used to joke with her, now kept their distance. She heard snippets in passing, half-whispered sentences that stopped when she entered the room. "General's pet. Heard she's getting promoted faster. Sleeping her way to the top." Each word landed like a bruise. She didn't confront them. She didn't have to. The silence said enough. That night she found Sarah waiting by her bunk, expression anxious. "Lena, something's off. People are saying you're being protected by Thorp. That you know." Elena's jaw tightened. "Yeah, I know." "It's not true, right?" "Of course not," she said, her voice low, controlled. "He's my father." Sarah's eyes widened. "Still, that's not going to help the rumors." "I don't care," Elena snapped, then stopped, softening. "No, that's not true. I do care. I just don't know what to do about it." Sarah hesitated. "Then be careful. People here don't forgive quickly. And Thorp, he's got enemies." Elena looked away. "So do I." Later that week, Thorp called her in for another meeting. Not in his office this time, outside, near the old memorial field. Rows of plaques shimmered in the sunlight, names engraved in brass, soldiers lost to wars that most people had already forgotten. He stood with his hands behind his back, his shadow long across the grass. "Did you know your mother's brother served?" he asked quietly, not turning to face her. Elena frowned. "My uncle, I never met him." "He was in my unit," Thorp said. "Kandahar 2009. The name hit her like a small jolt. "You knew him." He nodded slowly. "He was a good man, brave, too brave, maybe." "What happened to him?" Thorp's face hardened. "We were on a raid. Intel was wrong, civilians in the compound. Chaos broke out. He was caught in the crossfire." Elena's chest constricted. "So he died under your command?" "Yes." "And you never told my mother?" He finally turned toward her, pain flickering across his face. She never wanted to hear from me again. I thought telling her would only reopen wounds. Elena took a step back, shaking her head. You don't get to decide which wounds I inherit. His jaw clenched. You're right. For a long moment, neither spoke. The flags rustled softly in the wind, and the bass PA system echoed faintly in the distance. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Was it an accident or a cover-up? Thorp froze. Because people talk, sir, she continued, eyes sharp. And lately I've been hearing things about Kandahar. His silence said enough. Answer me. He took a slow breath. It was chaos, a bad call, people died who shouldn't have. I signed off on a report that made it cleaner. Her hands clenched into fists. Cleaner. He looked down. I was protecting my men, protecting what was left of their careers. It was the only way. No, she said bitterly. It was the coward's way. He flinched but didn't argue. She turned to leave, every step heavy. He called after her, voice breaking. I lost him too, Elena. I carry that every day. She didn't look back, then carry it alone. That night she couldn't stop shaking. She sat on her bunk, the letter from her mother beside her, the old photo on her lap. She traced the tattoo with trembling fingers. The phoenix, once a symbol of strength, now felt like a scar of betrayal. Sarah walked in quietly. You okay? Elena didn't answer right away. Then, do you ever feel like your life was written by someone else? Like you're just walking through decisions other people made for you? Sarah sat beside her. All the time, but that's why we fight, to rewrite them. Elena gave a hollow laugh. My whole life, I thought I was running from a ghost. Turns out I was walking right toward him. Sarah hesitated. So what now? I find the truth, Elena said, all of it. Vance made sure she would. 2 days later, she found an envelope under her door. No name, no sender, just 3 words scrawled across the front. Ask your father about Kandahar. Inside were photocopies, partial, grainy, but clear enough. Mission reports, casualty lists, redacted lines. But one thing stood out, her uncle's name under collateral. And beneath it, a note in a different handwriting. Civilian compound misidentified. Orders came from Thorp. Her breath caught, the room spun. She looked at the photo again, her mother's smiling face, and felt the world tilt. He'd killed her uncle. Maybe not by bullet, but by order. The man who claimed to protect her family had destroyed it first. Thorp, meanwhile, felt the walls closing in. Rumors reached his desk about leaked files, about whispers of Kandahar being reopened for investigation. He recognized the pattern. It wasn't random. Someone was orchestrating it. Vance. He knew that name like a scar. He'd left Vance behind on that day, bleeding out after the blast. The report had said KIA. But clearly, death had been too merciful. Thorp called in an old favor from internal affairs, but it was too late. The damage had begun. Leaked documents were circulating among senior staff. Journalists were sniffing around. And worst of all, Elena had seen the file. He found her near the training yard, punching a heavy bag until her knuckles bled through the wraps. Elena, he said softly. She didn't stop. Talk to me, he said, stepping closer. She turned, eyes blazing. You lied. He opened his mouth, but she cut him off. You said it was chaos. You said you tried to protect them, but I saw the report. You gave the order. He looked at her, grief etched deep. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. Then how was it supposed to happen? She snapped. Because from where I'm standing, my uncle's dead, my mother's gone, and the man who could have stopped it is the same one who gave the command. He stepped forward. You don't understand what war does. No, she said, voice trembling. You don't understand what silence does. The air between them cracked like thunder. For a moment she thought he might shout back the soldier's instinct to fight, but instead he just whispered, You're right. And somehow that broke her more than anger ever could. She turned away, tears burning her eyes. "You don't get to be right about me anymore." Then she walked off, leaving him standing alone, the weight of 2 decades pressing down like gravity. That night, Elena sat outside the barracks under the floodlights, the base unusually quiet. Her mind spun. Lies, guilt, grief, all tangled in one knot she couldn't untie. In the distance, thunder rumbled again. The storm was coming back. She didn't see the man watching her from across the lot, Vance, half hidden in shadow, cigarette ember glowing faintly. He smiled to himself. Everything was falling into place. He'd made sure the right envelope reached her. The right whispers reached command. Soon, the scandal would explode and Thorp's career, his legacy, his redemption would go up in flames. "Sometimes," Vance murmured to the night, "the best revenge is truth." The next morning, the base was alive with tension. Thorp's name had reached the military press. Questions raised over Kandahar operation. Anonymous sources claimed cover-up. Elena avoided him completely. But inside, guilt began gnawing at her. She hadn't leaked anything, but she'd played her part in the storm by walking away. During chow, she sat alone, staring at her untouched food. "Specialist Ramirez." She looked up. Thorp stood at the door again. This time his expression was calm, not anger, not accusation, just quiet resolve. "Come with me," he said. "Why?" "Because it's time you knew everything." She hesitated, then rose. They walked side by side across the courtyard. 2 soldiers, 2 ghosts, heading toward a truth that neither was ready for. The wind picked up, carrying dust across the field, and somewhere behind them, Vance watched from his office window, a satisfied smile creeping across his face. "Let's see how far you fall, General," he whispered. And as the storm gathered once more over Fort Bragg, the phoenix tattoo on Elena's arm caught the last light of day, flickering like a warning or a promise. What do you do when the truth you've been chasing turns out to be worse than the lie? Elena followed General Thorp across the base in silence. The evening air was heavy with humidity, storm clouds rolling low above the tree line. The walk felt endless, not because of distance, but because of everything unsaid between them. They stopped outside the operations building, the old concrete structure where classified files were kept under biometric lock. Thorp swiped his access card, pressed his thumb to the reader, and the door hissed open. Inside, the room was dim, humming with the low buzz of fluorescent lights. Metal cabinets lined the walls. The air smelled of dust, ink, and secrets. "Sit," he said quietly, gesturing to a metal chair beside the table. Elena didn't. She stayed standing, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Thorp sighed. "I guess I deserve that." He took out a folder marked Kandahar, classified 2009. The paper was old, corners frayed, the ink faded. "This," he said, placing it between them, "is the file no one was ever supposed to see." Elena's heart pounded. "Then why are you showing me?" "Because you've earned the right to know what your mother, what your family was sacrificed for." The word sacrificed hit like shrapnel. He flipped the file open. Inside were maps, photos, typed mission logs, and then a single image that stopped her breath. A village, or what was left of it, cratered ground, smoke, bodies under tarps. Thorp's voice was quiet. "We were ordered to take out a suspected insurgent compound. Intel came from a local informant. We were told there were hostiles storing weapons inside, but the intel was wrong." He pointed to a building marked on the photo. "That was a family's home. They were civilians, your mother's brother among them. He was their visiting relatives." Elena's knees nearly buckled. Thorp looked away. "When the blast hit, I lost half my squad. Vance was injured, left behind in the evacuation. I filed the report, took the blame for command decisions that weren't mine to make. But I also signed off on the edited version, the one that made it look clean." "Why?" she whispered. He stared down at the photo. Because sometimes the army doesn't want the truth, they want closure. Elena's voice trembled. So you lied. You let my family die and then buried them under paperwork. He didn't defend himself. Yes. Tears stung her eyes. Do you even hear yourself? I hear it every night, he said softly. Every time I close my eyes. Silence. The hum of the lights filled the space between them. Elena stepped closer to the table, staring down at the file. Her hands shook. And Vance, he's the one leaking this. Thorp nodded. He's been waiting years. He blames me for what happened. He thinks I left him to die. Did you? His eyes met hers, steady, haunted. Yes. She flinched. But I didn't have a choice, he continued, voice breaking. We were under fire. Evac chopper couldn't take everyone. I made the call, and I've lived with it ever since. Elena turned away, running a hand through her hair, fighting to breathe. You know what the worst part is, she said finally. You sound like a good man trying to convince himself he's not a bad one. Thorp closed the file. Maybe both can be true. She looked at him, eyes filled with tears that refused to fall. You don't get to make peace with it, not when you destroyed everyone else. He nodded, accepting the blow. Then help me make it right. Her expression hardened. Why should I? Because if Vance leaks everything, including your mother's connection, it won't just destroy me. It'll destroy you too. Your career, your reputation, everything you've built. She froze. He wouldn't. He already started. Thorp leaned forward, his voice low. He's feeding half-truths to the press. You're the headline he's waiting for. She swallowed hard. So what do you want me to do? I want you to stand by me, just until we can expose the real report, the one that proves who gave the order. It wasn't me, Elena. It came from higher up, someone who's still in uniform. He slid a flash drive across the table. The evidence is here, but I can't access the rest without help. She hesitated. Help from who? He met her gaze. You. The word hung between them, heavy, dangerous. She stared at the drive. You're asking me to go against the army. I'm asking you to do what's right. Elena looked down, her reflection trembling in the metal table. She thought of her mother, Maria, scrubbing floors, coughing blood into a handkerchief. Of her uncle, nameless on a casualty report. Of her younger self, wishing for someone to tell her she mattered. And now here was that someone, the father who'd left, asking her to risk everything for a truth she didn't trust. Why me? She whispered. Because you're the only one who still believes in something. For the first time his voice cracked. The soldier was gone. Only the man remained. Elena stared at him for a long time. Then she picked up the flash drive. This doesn't make us family, she said quietly. I know. But it makes us accountable. He nodded. She turned to leave, her footsteps echoing through the empty corridor. Behind her, Thorp stood motionless, a man haunted not by what he'd done, but by what he was still trying to fix. That night, Elena sat alone in the comms lab, the glow of the computer screen painting her face blue. She plugged in the flash drive. Encrypted files, layers of password protection. Her fingers moved fast. She learned enough about systems to find cracks where others saw walls. Her mother used to say she had a gift for puzzles, for seeing patterns in the noise. Minutes turned into hours, code blurred into symbols. And then a breakthrough. A folder unlocked. Inside, message logs, audio files, satellite images. She clicked on one. A transmission dated 3 days before the Kandahar raid. Target confirmed. Authorization granted by Command Sector Delta. The voice was Thorp's. It was someone else, someone higher. Elena's eyes widened. She scanned the signature code at the end of the file. Her heart nearly stopped. The authorization came from Colonel Vance. She sat back, her mind spinning. He wasn't just a survivor. He was the architect, the one who had called in the strike, the one who'd covered his own mistake and let Thorp take the fall. Everything made sense now, the leaks, the revenge, the manipulation. He wasn't after justice. He was after destruction. Elena's pulse quickened. She saved the file to a hidden directory and pulled the drive out. She needed to tell Thorp. But Vance was already moving faster. That same night, a secure memo hit the base network, an anonymous tip sent to higher command. It accused Thorp of falsifying reports, abusing authority, and maintaining improper relationships with a subordinate specialist Ramirez. The kind of accusation that destroys reputations before anyone can deny them. By dawn, investigators were on base. Elena woke to knocking at her door. 2 MPs stood outside. "Specialist Ramirez, you're wanted for questioning." Her gut turned to ice. They took her to the security office, a small, sterile room with mirrored glass and humming lights. The officer across from her didn't look up from his clipboard. "You've been named in an ongoing investigation involving General Thorp. We're here to assess your involvement." "Involvement in what?" she asked, heart pounding. He looked up. "A cover-up and a personal relationship that compromises your position." Her fists clenched. "That's a lie." "Then you have nothing to worry about," he said calmly. "But until this clears, you're on restricted duty." The words hit harder than any bullet. She sat there stunned as he gathered his papers and stood. The door clicked shut behind him. Thorp heard about it hours later. His office was already half empty, files confiscated, access revoked. He stood by the window, watching MPs load sealed boxes into a transport van. When the knock came, he already knew who it was. Elena stepped inside, her uniform rumpled, her face pale but furious. "They're saying I slept with you," she spat. "I know," he said quietly. "They're saying I leaked documents, that I helped you cover things up." "I know." Her voice broke. "You said you'd fix this." "I will," he said, his tone steady but hollow. "But I can't do it alone anymore." She threw the flash drive on his desk. "Then start with this. It's proof Vance gave the order. You didn't." He stared at her, shocked. "You found it." She nodded. "It's in his voice, his code, his authorization." For a moment, something like hope flickered between them. Then outside the office, boots thundered down the hallway. 2 investigators entered, flanked by MPs. "General Thorp, you're being relieved of command pending formal inquiry." Thorp didn't resist. He simply looked at Elena, his eyes calm. "Keep it safe," he whispered. "Don't trust anyone." They cuffed him. The hallway filled with whispers as soldiers stopped to watch their commanding officer, the man they called Unbreakable, escorted out like a criminal. Elena stood frozen. No salute, no words, just the echo of his footsteps fading down the corridor. That night she sat in darkness again, the flash drive clutched tight in her palm. The truth was here, proof that could clear his name. But using it would mean exposing Vance and the people above him. It would mean risking her career, maybe her freedom. Outside, thunder rolled once more, the same storm circling back, as if refusing to leave until the truth was done. She closed her eyes. Her mother's voice echoed in memory. "You're stronger than you know, Mija. Rise from it." Elena opened her eyes, determination replacing fear. She knew what she had to do. Tomorrow, she would confront the man who started it all. Not as a daughter, not as a soldier, but as a woman who'd had enough of silence. And this time, the phoenix wasn't rising from ashes. It was coming for fire. What do you do when the truth can set you free, but destroy everything you've built? Elena didn't sleep that night. She sat on her bunk long after lights out, the flash drive in her hand like a live grenade. The hum of the air conditioner and the steady ticking of her watch were the only sounds in the barracks. Each second that passed pressed heavier on her chest. She had proof now, proof that could exonerate Thorp and expose the real culprit. But the question wasn't if she'd use it, it was how. Because in the army, truth wasn't always a weapon you could wield safely. Sometimes it turned on you. Outside, thunder rolled again, the storm hanging over Fort Bragg like an omen that refused to move on. By morning, Elena had made her choice. She wasn't going through official channels. Not yet. She'd seen what official did. It buried people like her mother. It protected the ones who already had power. If she handed this over, it would disappear into red tape before sunrise. No, this time, she'd face the devil directly. She waited until the shift rotation changed, until the base quieted, and then walked toward the administrative wing. The flash drive was tucked into the inner pocket of her uniform, pressing against her heartbeat. When she reached Colonel Vance's office, the door was half open. She paused. His voice drifted through, smooth and confident. Yes, the general's already in custody. The board will do the rest. No, the Ramirez girl won't be a problem. She'll burn herself out soon enough. Her hand tightened on the doorknob. She pushed it open. Vance looked up, startled for a fraction of a second before that familiar smirk returned. Specialist Ramirez, to what do I owe the honor? She stepped inside. You lied. He leaned back, folding his hands behind his head. You'll have to be more specific. Kandahar, she said. The strike order, the deaths, my uncle, it was you. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes flickered. Careful, soldier. That's a serious accusation. I've got proof, she said, her voice steady. Your voice, your authorization code. He rose slowly from his chair, circling the desk like a predator testing distance. You think you understand what you found. You think you're the first to dig into the truth. That operation saved lives. It killed innocent people. He chuckled softly. Innocence is a luxury, Ramirez. You're in the military, you should know that. Her jaw clenched. You destroyed Thorp's career to save your own. His tone darkened. He destroyed mine first. I was left to die because of him. I built myself back from nothing while he climbed the ranks and gave speeches about integrity. You called in a strike on civilians, she said. You killed my family. He stopped packing. Your family, a low laugh escaped him. Ah, so that's what this is about, daddy issues. Her fist slammed onto the desk before she realized she'd moved. Don't talk about him. Or what? His eyes narrowed. You'll hit me, leak your little recording, go ahead. See how far it gets you before they drag you out in cuffs. You're nothing, Ramirez, an enlisted girl with a story and no proof that won't disappear the moment I say so. Her breath trembled, but she didn't back down. You think I'm scared of you? She asked. He smiled coldly. You should be. For a second they just stared at each other, the predator and the phoenix. Then she said softly, maybe I was, but not anymore. She turned and walked out before he could answer. Vance watched her go, his grin fatting. He picked up the phone. She knows, he said to whoever was on the other end. Handle it. Elena barely made it back to the barracks before she realized she was being followed. It started as a shadow in the reflection of a window, then footsteps, faint but steady. She kept walking, forcing her pace to stay normal. She turned a corner, then another. The steps followed. She slipped into the maintenance hallway behind the motor pool and pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering. The figure passed, tall, broad, moving with purpose. Not a random soldier, someone sent. She waited until he disappeared, then doubled back toward the communications wing. She had to make a copy of the files, get them out before someone erased everything. Inside, the lab was dark. Only the red standby lights blinked on the machines. She sat at a terminal, plugged in the drive, and started the transfer. 5 minutes, that's all she needed. Halfway through, the door opened. Working late, specialist. Vance. She froze. He stepped into the light, casual, hands in pockets. You really should have stayed quiet. How did you? You didn't think I'd monitor access logs, he smiled. "You're good, but I'm better." He crossed the room, stopping just short of her. "You've got a lot of potential, Ramirez. I could have helped you climb, but you made the mistake of thinking the system cares about truth." She turned, defiant. "I don't need the system." He leaned closer. "You need me." "Not anymore." The screen beeped, the transfer complete. She yanked the flash drive, slipped it into her pocket, and took a step back. Vance's smile vanished. "You think you can run with that?" She didn't answer. "Where will you go?" he taunted. "Every exit watched, every terminal's traced. You're finished." She took one step toward him, eyes steady. "You ever seen a phoenix burn, Colonel?" He frowned. She slammed the emergency alarm button on the wall. Red lights flooded the room, sirens blaring through the corridors. In the chaos, she bolted past him, through the door, down the hall. Soldiers scrambled from quarters, shouting orders, confused. Elena disappeared into the crowd, adrenaline pushing her forward. Outside, rain poured down. The storm had finally broken. She ran across the courtyard, headlights sweeping through sheets of water. Somewhere behind her, Vance's voice barked orders. "Lock down the gates. She's got classified material." She ducked behind a Humvee, chest heaving. She had one shot left, to get the data off base before they caught her. Her only ally was the man sitting in a holding cell. "Thorp." She sprinted toward the detention wing, water splashing under her boots. The guard at the entrance barely had time to react before she flashed her ID and shouted, "Command retrieval, urgent transfer." Her tone carried authority she didn't feel, but the young MP obeyed. The door buzzed open. Inside, the hallway was dim and cold. Cells lined the walls. She found Thorp sitting on the cot, bruised but alert. He looked up. "Elena." She pressed the flash drive into his hand through the bars. "Vance, it was him. I've got proof." His eyes widened. "You need to get this to outside command. The Inspector General's office in D.C. It's the only place it won't vanish." "I can't leave base. They're locking it down." He hesitated, then reached through the bars, gripping her hand. "Then you find someone who can, someone you trust." She nodded, breathing hard. "What about you?" "I'll hold them off as long as I can." The alarm lights flashed red over his face, carving deep lines of guilt and resolve. "Go, Elena, don't look back." She squeezed his hand once and ran. Outside, chaos erupted. Sirens wailed. Orders barked over radios. MPs blocked roads, searching vehicles. The storm blurred everything into streaks of gray. Elena tore through the motor pool, cutting behind supply trucks. Her uniform was soaked, her boots heavy with mud. She ducked under a fence, crawling through to the perimeter road. Her destination, the small civilian airstrip 5 miles outside base. If she could reach it, she could find a courier pilot or a sympathetic contact to smuggle the data out. Halfway there, headlights blinded her. A Humvee screeched to a halt. Vance stepped out, rain dripping off his cap. His voice cut through the storm. "It's over, Ramirez." She didn't stop. He raised his sidearm. "Don't make me shoot you." She turned, eyes burning through the rain. "You already shot my family once." For a moment, neither moved. The rain fell between them, relentless. Then a shout echoed from behind, MPs closing in. Elena took a breath. "You'll have to catch me first." She darted toward the tree line. Bullets tore through the night, warning shots. She didn't look back. Branches slapped her face, mud splashing up her legs, her lungs burning. She could barely see the path ahead, but she kept running. Finally, she stumbled into a clearing. Her knees hit the ground. The flash drive was still in her hand, slick with rain. A figure emerged from the shadows. For a split second, fear flared, until she recognized the voice. "Get up, Ramirez." "Sarah." Her roommate, dripping wet, breathing hard. "What? How did you?" "I heard what they were saying. I followed you." Sarah's eyes flicked to the flash drive. That's what this is all about, isn't it? Elena nodded, gasping. Proof. Vance called the strike, not Thorp. Sarah looked behind them. Flashlights glowed in the distance. We don't have much time. She pointed toward the service road. There's a maintenance truck down that way. I can drive. You ride shotgun. Elena blinked, stunned. You don't even know what you're getting into. Sarah gave a grim smile. Then I'm already in. They ran. The truck roared to life, headlights cutting through the rain. They sped down the dirt road, the base shrinking behind them. For a moment, it felt like freedom. But in the rearview mirror, a convoy of lights appeared, military vehicles closing fast. Sarah gripped the wheel tighter. Tell me this was worth it. Elena looked at the flash drive, glowing faintly in her palm. It has to be. The truck bounced over a ridge, the airstrip lights flickering ahead. But as they neared the fence, another vehicle swerved in from the side, Vance's Humvee. He rammed the truck's back bumper. Metal screamed. The truck fishtailed, spinning into the mud. Sarah slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The truck skidded sideways and stopped, steam rising from the hood. Vance stepped out again, pistol in hand. This is where it ends, specialist, he said, voice calm, cold. Hand it over. Elena climbed out slowly, rain plastering her hair to her face. She hid the flash drive behind her back. Vance raised the gun. Don't make this worse. For a second, the only sound was the storm. Then Sarah shouted, now. She threw the door open, slamming it into Vance. The gun went off, echoing through the night. Elena lunged forward, tackling him. They hit the ground hard, mud splattering around them. The gun slid away. Vance's hand caught her wrist. They struggled, twisting, rolling through the rain. His face was inches from hers, eyes filled with fury. You think you can save him, he hissed. You'll go down with him. Maybe, she gasped, but at least I'll go down fighting. She drove her knee into his ribs, breaking free. She grabbed the gun, aimed, but didn't fire. Instead, she pointed it at the headlights. The convoy was seconds away. She fired once. The bullet shattered the light, plunging the road into darkness. She turned to Sarah. Go. They sprinted toward the airstrip fence. Vance's curses echoed behind them, drowned by the sound of rain and engines. They reached the wire. Sarah boosted her up. Elena climbed, cutting her hands, the flash drive clenched between her teeth. She dropped to the other side, landing hard. Sarah followed, just as the Humvee's headlights reappeared. The girls ran toward the hangar lights, toward the thin line of safety between chaos and truth. Behind them, Vance raised his weapon again, shouting something she couldn't hear. And ahead of them, the storm finally began to break, clouds parting to reveal a sliver of dawn. For the first time in days, light touched Elena's face. And she didn't stop running. How far would you go to deliver the truth, when every mile could be your last? The rain had slowed to a mist by the time Elena and Sarah reached the airstrip. Dawn crept through the clouds, turning the sky a bruised gray. Every breath burned in Elena's lungs, every muscle screamed, but she kept running. The flash drive, the proof, the lifeline was still warm in her grasp. Behind them, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. The base wasn't far, but far enough that the open fields gave them a head start. The small civilian hangar loomed ahead, corrugated metal glistening with rain. A single light flickered above the entrance. Sarah slowed, gasping. You sure about this? No, Elena said, panting. But if we stop now, everything dies with us. They pushed through the door. Inside, the hangar smelled of oil and gasoline. A single Cessna sat on the runway, engine idling, a man in coveralls doing final checks. He turned as they entered, startled. Hey, this area's restricted. You can't. Elena stepped forward, pulling out her ID. U.S. Army, I need your help. He hesitated, eyes darting between them. This is a civilian field, whatever trouble you're in. Please, she said, her voice cracking with urgency. Someone's life depends on it, a lot of lives. Something in her tone, the desperation, the conviction made him pause. Sarah stepped in. We just need this drive delivered. Washington, Inspector General's office, it's evidence. If we don't get it there, people die. He frowned. You're serious? Elena nodded. We'll stay, just take this. The pilot looked at them for a long second, then sighed. You didn't see me, I didn't see you. He reached for the flash drive. A shout split the air outside. Freeze! Elena spun. Military trucks skidded onto the runway, tires hissing against wet asphalt. Headlights flared. Vance's voice cut through the chaos. Nobody moves. The pilot froze, drive still in hand. Go, Elena shouted. Get it out. He bolted toward the plane, clutching the drive. Gunfire erupted not at him but at the ground near his feet. Warning shots. The sound cracked through the morning, echoing off metal walls. Vance strode forward, pistol raised. Stand down, Ramirez. Elena stepped in front of the hangar door, her arms outstretched. He's not your enemy. Vance smirked. Neither are you technically, yet. Let him go. Give me the drive, and maybe I'll consider it. He's already gone. Even as she said it, the small Cessna's engine roared to life. The propeller spun, slicing the air. The plane began rolling down the runway, slow at first, then faster. Vance's face twisted. Stop HIM. His men opened fire. Bullets ripped through the dawn, sparks flying as they hit metal. Elena dove for cover, Sarah grabbing her arm, both of them rolling behind a fuel barrel. The plane's wheels lifted from the ground, rising into the gray sky. It was gone. The drive was out. Elena let out a shaky breath. It's over. Vance's snarl echoed across the field. No, it's just beginning. He turned to his men. Arrest them both. The holding cell was small, just concrete walls, one steel door and the hum of a single light overhead. Elena sat on the cot, wrists cuffed, soaked to the bone. Across the room, Sarah leaned against the wall, arms crossed, defiant despite the exhaustion on her face. You think the drive made it? Sarah asked quietly. It has to, Elena said. That pilot was fast. Once it's in DC, Vance can't stop it. Sarah nodded slowly. Then we just have to survive until it hits. The door opened with a metallic clang. Vance entered, dry now, uniform pressed, calm as ever. 2 MPs flanked him. Specialist Ramirez, he said, his tone almost gentle. You've caused quite a mess. Elena didn't respond. I should thank you, he continued. Really, you made this easier. Everyone already believes the general corrupted you, took advantage of a young soldier. Now they'll believe you tried to cover for him. That little stunt at the airfield sealed it. She looked up slowly. You're afraid. He smiled. Of what? Of the truth getting out. His eyes hardened. There's no truth without witnesses, and witnesses can disappear. He nodded to the MPs. Transfer them to Central Holding. I'll handle their statements personally. The guards moved forward. Elena stood, refusing to show fear. As they led her down the corridor, she caught Sarah's eyes, a silent promise passing between them. Hold on. Meanwhile, miles away, the Cessna sliced through turbulent skis. The pilot's hands shook on the controls. The storm hadn't fully cleared, and wind buffeted the small aircraft hard. But his eyes kept flicking to the flash drive clipped to the dashboard. He didn't know what was on it, didn't care. The woman's voice still rang in his head, someone's life depends on it. So he flew harder, pushing through the weather, through fatigue, through fear. When the radio crackled, he jumped. This is Fort Bragg Control Tower. Unauthorized flight, identify immediately. He didn't respond, just kept flying. The clouds broke briefly, sunlight streaking through. Washington was still hours away, but the hardest part, leaving the base, was done. Below, somewhere in North Carolina's sprawl, truth was finally in motion. Back at Fort Bragg, the walls were closing in. General Thorp sat in his interrogation cell, eyes shadowed, hands folded. He'd been through worse in his life, captivity, ambush, betrayal, but nothing like this. This was slow death, the kind that stripped a man piece by piece. The door opened, Vance stepped in. "Old friend," he said smoothly, "we finally get to talk." Thorp didn't move. "You always did enjoy talking when the other man couldn't walk away." Vance smiled. "Oh, you can walk away, Harlan, just sign a few papers, confess. Say the girl helped you falsify reports. You'll keep your pension, she'll get leniency, everyone wins." Thorp stared at him. "You really think I'd sell her out?" "I think you will when you realize she's already lost," Vance said coldly. "She's under arrest. Attempted theft, espionage, aiding a fugitive. She's finished. Unless, of course, you cooperate." Thorp's fists clenched. "You don't have to protect her," Vance said. "She's not even your blood." That hit its mark. Thorp's head lifted slowly, eyes narrowing. "What did you say?" Vance leaned closer, his grin cruel. "DNA results came back. She's not yours." Thorp's breath caught. "You're lying." "Am I? I pulled the files myself. Maria must have had quite a few visitors while you were gone." Thorp lunged, hands slamming against the table. The MPs rushed in, restraining him, but he didn't look away from Vance. "You touch her and I swear." "You'll what?" Vance interrupted, still smiling. "You're done, General. I won 20 years ago in Kandahar. This is just the encore." He turned to leave but paused at the door. "Enjoy the show." The door slammed shut. Thorp stood there, chest heaving, hands trembling. He didn't believe it. He couldn't. Elena wasn't his by paperwork maybe, but she was his by truth, by every mistake he'd made, every promise he'd broken, every piece of himself he saw in her eyes. He wouldn't lose her again. He sat back, mind racing. The system was corrupt, the walls rigged, but walls could be broken if you had something to fight for. And now he did. In the transport van, Elena stared out the small window as the base lights faded behind them. Rain streaked the glass. Sarah sat beside her, whispering low. "We're not making it to Central Holding, are we?" Elena shook her head. "No, they'll make it look like we tried to escape." Sarah swallowed. "So what's the plan?" Elena looked down at the cuffs around her wrists. "We wait." "Wait for what?" "For someone who doesn't play by their rules." Inside the base, alarms blared again, not from a breach but from the sky. A helicopter thundered overhead, low and fast, heading straight for the detention wing. Soldiers shouted, scrambling. Searchlights flicked on, cutting through the rain. In his cell, Thorp looked up as dust fell from the ceiling. A faint smile tugged at his lips. Maybe fate was giving him one last chance. The chopper touched down near the perimeter, blades slicing the air. Two masked figures jumped out, contractors or former soldiers by their gear. One moved fast toward the guard post. A struggle, gunshots muffled by the storm. Moments later, Thorp's cell door buzzed open. The masked figure pulled off his hood, an old ally, a man Thorp once saved in Afghanistan. "Thought you might need a lift," the man said. Thorp stood, grabbing his jacket. "We need to intercept a transport, 2 soldiers, Ramirez and Lawson. They'll be on Highway 17 by now." "Then we don't have time." They ran toward the helicopter. The wind howled, the rain hammering the windshield, but the mission, for the first time in years, felt clear. On the road, the transport van sped through darkness. The MPs in front chatted idly, unaware of the storm behind them. Sarah leaned close to Elena. "You sure about this?" Elena smirked faintly, "Not even a little." She kicked her heel against the floor panel. A loose bolt popped free. She noticed it earlier. Sometimes even a prison had weak spots. She shifted her leg again, harder this time. The panel dropped. "Now," she whispered, They both lunged, slamming their shoulders into the back door. Once, twice. On the third hit it burst open, wind roaring in. The van swerved wildly. "Jump!" Elena shouted. They dove into the rain. The world spun, gravel cutting their arms, air ripped from their lungs. They rolled down a slope, landing hard in the mud. The van screeched to a stop behind them, headlights swinging. "Run!" Sarah yelled. They stumbled into the woods, branches tearing at their clothes. And above them, faint at first, came the whine of rotor blades. A helicopter. It descended fast, wind whipping through the trees. Elena looked up and froze. Through the open side door she saw him. Thorp. Their eyes met through the rain. He reached out his hand. "Let's finish this." They climbed aboard, the doors slammed shut. For the first time, Elena allowed herself to breathe. Thorp gripped her shoulder, relief and pride flooding his face. "You did it, you got it out." "I don't know if it's reached DC yet," she said, "but it's on its way." He nodded. "Then we make sure it's not lost on the way." As the helicopter rose, the base lights shrinking below, Elena glanced out the window. Vance stood by the runway, his coat whipping in the wind, staring up at them. For the first time, he didn't look in control. As dawn broke over the Carolina fields, the helicopter sliced through the pale sky, heading north. Inside, Elena sat beside Thorp, exhausted but unbroken. "You came back for me," she said softly. He looked at her, voice thick with emotion. "I wasn't going to make the same mistake twice." She nodded, eyes on the horizon. "Then let's make sure we both live to tell the truth." The wind roared around them. The sky ahead was clearing, sunlight breaking through. And for the first time since that tray hit the floor in the mess hall, Elena felt something close to peace. Not because the fight was over, but because she'd finally chosen her side. How do you clear your name when the system built to protect truth is the one burying it? The helicopter cut across the dawn sky, blades chopping the air in rhythmic thunder. The fields below blurred into a patchwork of fog and light. Inside, Elena gripped her harness as the wind buffeted the craft. Across from her, Thorp sat rigid, headset pressed to one ear, speaking low to the pilot. "ETA to checkpoint." 20 minutes, the pilot replied, "if we're lucky." Luck felt like a fragile thing to depend on. Elena glanced out the window. The horizon glowed faintly orange, sunlight trying to break through clouds. For the first time in days, she could see a sliver of blue sky ahead, but peace still felt miles away. "How long until Vance realizes we're gone?" she asked. Thorp didn't look up. "He already knows. The moment we took off, he'll have scrambled pursuit, ground convoys, maybe even drones. So we're flying straight into a storm." He gave a small, grim smile. "Wouldn't be the first time." Elena looked down at her hands, the mud under her nails, the blood on her knuckles, the trembling she couldn't hide. "I thought once the truth was out, I'd feel lighter." "You don't," he said quietly. "Not at first. Truth doesn't heal, it exposes." She studied him for a long moment. "You still think I'm yours?" His eyes flicked to hers. "You think I need a lab to tell me that?" She didn't respond, but deep down she didn't need one either. They landed near a truck depot just off Highway 64, a safe house Thorp had arranged years ago under an old contact's name. The man waiting for them was grizzled, lean, his eyes wary but kind. "General," he greeted, "heard you might come calling someday." Thorp clasped his hand. "We need a secure line to DC Inspector General's office. File code, Kandahar." The man raised a brow. "That old ghost. Still haunting?" He nodded. "Inside. You've got maybe 10 minutes before someone pings this location." They stepped into the small office. The place smelled of oil and dust. A single desk with a military-grade transmitter stood in the corner. Thorp motioned for Elena to sit. "You're the one who got it this far. You send it." She hesitated. What if they trace the signal? They will, but by the time they do, it'll already be in federal servers. After that, it's untouchable. Elena inserted the backup flash drive she'd made before the airfield, the one Vance didn't know existed. She typed in the secure routing code, her hands steady now. The progress bar inched across the screen, 20%, 40%, 65%. Then the monitor flickered. Signal jam detected. Thorp cursed under his breath. He's onto us. Elena's fingers flew over the keyboard. I can reroute through a civilian frequency, bounce it through a weather satellite. Do it. She worked fast, sweat beading on her forehead. The static cleared. The progress bar resumed. 91%, 97%, 100%. Transmission complete. Elena let out a shaky breath. It's done, she said. Thorpe's shoulders sagged. Then we just started a war. The safe house door burst open a moment later. Contact, the pilot shouted. Elena dove behind the desk as gunfire erupted outside. The windows shattered, glass spraying across the room. Thorp grabbed his sidearm, returning fire through the doorway. 2 trucks, maybe more, the pilot yelled. Vance's men, Thorp growled. Move. They ran through the back exit, bullets shredding the metal siding behind them. Rain had started again, light misty, turning the air thick and gray. They sprinted toward the trees. A bullet hit the ground near Elena's foot. She stumbled but kept running. Up the ridge, Thorp shouted. They climbed the muddy slope, breath burning, lungs aching. At the top, they dropped behind a fallen log, catching their breath. Below, Vance's convoy arrived, black SUVs, lights off, tires crunching gravel. Elena could see him through binoculars, calm, calculating. He stepped out of the lead vehicle, scanning the tree line. He won't stop, she whispered. No, Thorp said. He can't afford to. That file destroys everything he's built. What happens if he gets to us first? Thorp's expression hardened. Then we make sure it's not for nothing. They moved deeper into the woods, sticking close to old dirt paths. The rain made every step slick, every branch a hazard. Elena's boots squelched in the mud. She was shivering, soaked to the bone, but she refused to stop. At one point, Thorp slowed, glancing at her. You holding up? She nodded, though her body screamed otherwise. I've been through worse. He gave a small smile. You get that from your mother. She looked at him, really looked at him. The lines on his face, the weariness, the quiet strength. You loved her. He didn't hesitate. I never stopped. They walked in silence for a while. Finally, Elena said softly, she never stopped loving you either. Thorp froze mid-step. How do you know? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. Elena looked at him, eyes glassy. Because she never let me hate you. He exhaled shakily. Then I owe her one more truth. She frowned. What truth? He stopped walking. Vance wasn't the only one who signed off on the cover-up. I did too. I didn't order the strike, but I buried it. I let him walk free, and for that I'm guilty. Elena stared at him, shock and anger flashing across her face. Why tell me now? Because you deserve the whole story, and because you need to know what kind of man you're saving. She swallowed hard. You think I don't already? He shook his head. Not yet, but you will. They reached an abandoned ranger station near the edge of the forest, half collapsed, surrounded by overgrowth. They took shelter inside, lighting a single lantern. Rain drummed against the roof. Elena sat on the floor, staring at the flickering flame. You could have stayed gone. Let me believe whatever version of you I wanted. Why come back? Thorp leaned against the wall, his face shadowed. Because running is easy, facing yourself is. Maybe you're not the only one learning that, she said softly. He looked at her, really looked. You remind me of her so much it hurts. Then maybe that's how she forgives you. For a moment, the room was quiet except for the rain. Then the sound of engines broke the silence. Headlights cut through the trees outside. Thorp blew out the lantern. They found us. He loaded his weapon, handing another to her. If they breach, you take the north exit. Get to the ridge, don't stop. I'm not leaving you. That's an order. She stared at him, heart pounding. I'm not your soldier right now. He smiled faintly. No, you're my daughter. The words hit her harder than the gunfire that followed. The first truck smashed through the tree line, floodlights sweeping the clearing. Bullets tore into the cabin. Wood splintered. Thorp returned fire, precise and relentless. Elena covered the rear window, taking aim, counting shots. She wasn't a combat specialist, but training took over. Calm breathing, steady hands, clear focus. Left flank, Thorp shouted. She pivoted, fired. One assailant dropped. Another advanced through the brush. They were outnumbered 5-1. Retreat, Thorp yelled. Elena hesitated, eyes darting to him. Come with me. Go, he barked. A grenade hit the wall. The explosion rocked the cabin, throwing them both to the ground. Dirt and smoke filled the air. Elena coughed, ears ringing. She looked up. Thorp was pinned under debris. Dad. The word tore out before she could stop it. She crawled to him, trying to lift the beam. It wouldn't budge. He grabbed her hand, blood streaking his temple. Go, finish it. I'm not leaving you. He looked at her, eyes fierce even through the pain. Don't let my mistakes die with me. Get it to the world. Tears blurred her vision. I already sent it. He shook his head weakly. You sent a copy, the original logs, they're still encrypted. The system needs confirmation codes, my codes. He pressed a small key fob into her palm. Get this to DC, it'll unlock everything. Please. He smiled faintly. Phoenixes don't look back, Mija. A second explosion ripped through the side wall. The roof groaned. Flames licked the edges of the cabin. Elena screamed, drowned in the roar. Thorp's grip loosened. Go, he whispered. She backed away, choking, stumbling toward the rear door. Through the smoke, she saw him one last time, still trying to rise, still fighting even as the ceiling gave way. Then the fire consumed him. Elena ran into the forest, tears mixing with rain, the key fob clutched in her fist. Behind her, the cabin collapsed in a wave of sparks and ash. By the time she reached the ridge, the horizon was streaked with dawn. The rain had stopped. The air was heavy and still. She dropped to her knees, gasping, staring back at the glow in the distance, the fire that had taken everything. But something inside her refused to break. The flash drive had started it. The key would finish it. She pulled the dog tags from around her neck, her mother on one, Thorp's on the other. She pressed them together, whispering, for both of you. Then she stood, wiping her tears, and started down the mountain. Because this wasn't the end, it was the reckoning. Some truths burned the world down before they rebuilt it. And as the wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of smoke and metal, Elena Ramirez, soldier, daughter, survivor, walked toward whatever waited next. She wasn't running anymore. She was rising. How do you end a war that lives inside you? The world beyond Fort Bragg blurred into miles of highway and memory. Elena drove through the early morning haze in a borrowed pickup, the key fob clenched tight in her hand. The dashboard clock blinked 5:42. The radio hissed with static. Somewhere behind her, smoke still rose from the forest where the cabin had burned. She didn't let herself look back. The road stretched endless, Carolina pines giving way to open fields, then to the first hints of city skyline. She drove with one purpose, one thought pulsing in her mind like a heartbeat. Get to DC, finish what he started. The sun rose slow, washing the world in pale gold. The sky was beautiful and cruel. She touched the dog tags hanging from the rearview mirror, one for her mother, one for Thorp. We're almost there, she whispered. By late morning, she reached the outskirts of Washington. Traffic thickened, life returning to normal for everyone but her. She parked in an alley 3 blocks from the Federal Inspector General's building, a gray monolith of glass and steel. To most, it was just another government tower. To her, it was the final battlefield. The key fob was still in her palm. Inside it, Thorp's authorization codes, the last piece of proof tying Colonel Vance to the Kandahar strike and to everything he'd done since. Her uniform was torn, mud-stained, the name patch barely hanging on. People stared as she walked, but she kept moving. She had no more energy for shame or fear. At the checkpoint, the guard frowned. "Ma'am, this area's restricted." "Specialist Elena Ramirez," she said, voice firm. "Urgent submission for the Inspector General's office. It concerns Operation Kandahar." The guard hesitated, recognizing the weight in her tone. He made a call. Seconds later, the gate buzzed open. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, antiseptic and cold. A receptionist pointed her toward an upper-floor office. "Deputy Inspector Harris can see you." Harris was middle-aged, deliberate, with a face that had seen too many files and not enough truth. He looked up from his desk as she entered. "You're the soldier from Bragg." "Yes, sir." She placed the key fob on his desk. "That unlocks a transmission you received this morning. It proves the strike at Kandahar was ordered and covered up by Colonel Vance." He studied her, cautious. "You realize the implications?" "Yes, sir, that's why I'm here." He turned the fob over, inserted it into his terminal, typed a code. The screen filled with data, timestamps, voice recordings. He listened to one, Vance's voice giving the order to strike. Silence filled the room. When the audio ended, Harris sat back, eyes heavy. "You understand, this will start an investigation that reaches far above him. People won't want this to see daylight." Elena met his gaze. "That's why you have to let it." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "I will." Her body sagged with exhaustion, relief and grief intertwining. Harris said quietly, "You'll need protection. They'll come for you before this is over." "I'm done running," she said. He studied her again, this bruised, mud-streaked soldier who spoke with the certainty of someone who'd lost everything but her purpose. "All right, specialist. We'll make sure your statement goes directly to the Oversight Committee, and we'll take care of Thorp's name." She swallowed hard. "He's gone." "I know," Harris's voice softened. "He'll be cleared posthumously." That single word, posthumously, hit her like shrapnel. She nodded, eyes shining but steady. By the time she stepped back outside, the clouds had thinned. Sunlight spilled down the marble steps. The city bustled, unaware, traffic horns, tourists, the smell of coffee and rain on concrete. She sat on the steps for a long time, watching people pass. Ordinary lives. People who'd never know how close truth had come to being buried forever. For the first time in years, she let herself cry, not out of weakness but release. Each tear carried years of silence, guilt, and survival. When she finally rose, she wasn't the same soldier who'd served mashed potatoes in a mess hall. She was something else, tempered, scarred, unbreakable. That evening, in a high-security briefing room, Colonel Vance faced his reckoning. He sat at a long table, hands cuffed, uniform immaculate, expression unreadable. Across from him, Inspector Harris played the recovered audio. "Target confirmed. Authorization Delta." His own voice filled the room, unmistakable. Vance didn't flinch. "Context," he said coolly. "You're hearing fragments." "Fragments that match mission logs and satellite data," Harris interrupted. "And a cover letter signed by you, reassigning blame to General Thorp." Vance leaned back, smirk fatting. "Thorp's dead. You can't verify any of this." "Actually," Harris said, sliding a folder across the table, "we can." Inside, the witness statement signed by Specialist Elena Ramirez, along with Thorp's final code log, the one she'd carried out of the fire. Vance's face hardened. Harris closed the folder. You buried the truth for 16 years. It won't stay buried anymore. Vance's composure cracked just slightly, a twitch in the jaw, a flicker of disbelief. You think she did this alone, a cook in a mess hall? Harris regarded him steadily. Sometimes courage looks smaller than you expect. The colonel's laugh was short, bitter. You're naive. Maybe, Harris said, but at least I can still sleep at night. He stood, motioning to the MPs. Take him. Vance didn't fight. He just straightened his shoulders as the cuffs clicked tighter, his eyes cold. The system will replace me, he muttered. Maybe, Harris said, but at least it won't be you. 2 weeks later, the official report hit the press. Army confirms cover-up in Kandahar incident. General Harlan Thorp cleared of wrongdoing. Colonel Vance in federal custody pending trial. The story spread fast, igniting outrage, reflection, and something rarer, empathy. Inside Fort Bragg, soldiers read the news in silence. Some remembered the general's stern face, others the young woman who had quietly served them lunch. Elena returned to the base quietly, her reinstatement offered but not yet accepted. She didn't care about rank anymore. She cared about closure. Sarah met her at the gate, smiling through tears. You did it. We did, Elena said. They walked across the familiar courtyard, where months earlier a tray had clattered to the floor and changed everything. The mess hall was nearly empty that afternoon. She stood behind the serving line, staring at the spot where Thorp had dropped his lunch, remembering the look on his face, the shock, the recognition, the regret. The silence felt holy somehow. She whispered, "We made it, Dad." For the first time, the word didn't feel foreign. Later, she visited the base memorial. Rows of names etched into stone, gold letters catching the sun. She traced one of them with her fingers, General Harlan Thorp. Someone had already placed fresh flowers there. She knelt, resting her hand on the cool surface. You said phoenixes don't look back, she murmured. But maybe sometimes they should, just once, to remember where they rose from. A breeze rustled the flags. She closed her eyes. The world felt still. For the first time, she wasn't haunted by the past. She was shaped by it. Months passed. Investigations widened. Reforms began. Quietly, almost invisibly, Elena's name circulated in briefings and whispers, the soldier who told the truth. She refused interviews. She turned down medals. She returned to work, but in a new unit, training recruits in ethics and mission conduct. Her voice during lectures was calm, low, steady. She never mentioned Kandahar. She didn't have to. Her presence was the lesson. One afternoon, a young cadet asked, "Ma'am, what made you join the Army?" Elena paused. "To find something bigger than myself," she said. Then softer, "And I did. But it wasn't the Army, it was the truth." That evening, as the sun set over Fort Bragg, she walked to the airfield, the same one where she'd risked everything. The runway lights blinked like stars across the asphalt. She stood there alone, watching a transport plane rise into the dusk. Sarah joined her quietly, hands in pockets. "You ever think about leaving?" Elena smiled faintly. "Every day." "Why stay?" She looked out at the horizon, the sky painted in orange and violet. "Because someone has to stay and make it better." Sarah nodded. "He'd be proud, you know." Elena didn't answer. She just watched the plane climb higher until it vanished into cloud. That night in her quarters, she opened the small wooden box on her desk. Inside were the 2 dog tags and the scorched phoenix patch she'd salvaged from Thorp's uniform after the fire. She placed them side by side. Maria Harlan, Elena. 3 lives, 1 fire, 1 rebirth. She whispered, "You both gave me your strength, one in love, one in regret. I'll carry them both." Outside, rain began again, soft, steady, cleansing. She sat by the window, listening. The base lights shimmered through the droplets, like stars scattered across puddles. She thought about everything that had happened, the lies, the losses, the courage it took just to keep breathing through it all. And in that stillness, she realized something Thorp had once tried to tell her. Redemption doesn't erase the past, it redeems the choice to face it. Weeks later, a small ceremony was held, private, no press, just a few soldiers and one empty chair. The base chaplain spoke briefly about service, sacrifice, and truth. When it was Elena's turn, she stepped forward, her uniform crisp, her voice steady. "General Thorp taught me that duty isn't about obedience," she said. "It's about conscience. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." Her words hung in the air, soft, certain, final. Afterward, she placed a single phoenix pin on the podium, the same design inked into her arm. The sunlight caught it, glinting like fire. As she walked away, a faint smile crossed her face, tired, bittersweet, but real. That night she stood again at the edge of the runway. The air was warm, the sky clear. A new batch of recruits marched nearby, their voices echoing faintly in cadence. Elena looked up at the stars and exhaled. The ghosts were quieter now. The grief still lived in her bones, but so did something else, peace. She rolled up her sleeve, tracing the tattoo on her forearm. The phoenix shimmered under the floodlights, alive in the glow. "Rise from it," she whispered, the last words her mother had ever said. She closed her eyes, feeling the wind on her face, the hum of engines in the distance, the rhythm of a life rebuilt from ashes. And for the first time in a long, long time, she wasn't running from the fire. She was flying through it. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.